Guys, so something big happened in the Trinidad, Venezuela, USA theater. General Dan Caine, otherwise known as Raisin Kane, came to Trinidad and Tobago. Now, for those of you who don't know who this guy is, he is the Joint Chief of Staff of the United States military. He's a close Trump confidant. So, a backstory on who he is. Apparently, when Trump went to Iraq and asked his generals, can you defeat ISIS in, 1 week? And most generals said, no, they can't. But General Dan Caine or Raisin Kane came and told Trump, yes, I can do it, essentially, right? And I'm a big fan of yours. And this essentially set itself into Trump's brain. And as a result of that sort of interaction, he was promoted in Trump's second presidency to the position of Joint Chiefs of Staff. Not only that, but during the Israeli-Iranian 12-day war, Trump had a war cabinet that did not include the traditional characters, i.e. Pete Hegseth wasn't part of that conversation. It was Marco Rubio, the VP, Tulsi Gabbard wasn't there, but General Dan Caine was advising Trump on the approach to dealing with Iran specifically. So him being in Trinidad is beyond symbolic. It means something is happening. We're moving further and further into, just war footing. And, my sort of analysis of the situation is that, specifically as it relates to Trinidad, is that yes, Trinidadians are scared, but we don't have a history of war or conflict at large scale happening. It's not in our historical memory. So a lot of the outrage that I see on the media when I'm talking to academics, when I'm talking to my colleagues back at home, it's almost performative without actual without an actual distillation of what things mean and how badly this can turn out if, of course, we do not prepare, right? So this is a man who oversaw special ops and intelligence programs across the Middle East. He has a CIA background. He's a fighter pilot, a war strategist. And one day after he leaves Trinidad, a US C-17 military transport lands in Tobago before sunrise. Eyewitnesses saw radar, hardware, Marines. Kamla was like, yes, they're here. Then 1 hour later says, no, nothing's here. So what the hell is going on in Trinidad and Tobago? I think we have to ask ourselves. And why is Washington moving, this quietly in our background? So officially, the visit was due to strengthen U.S.-Trinidad security partnership, the typical discuss transnational crime, right? Drugs, guns, trafficking, regional maritime air security cooperation, broader Caribbean security alignment. It was hosted by our Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar at the Diplomatic Center in Port of Spain. The visit, of course, occurs during a major expansion of U.S. military activity in the Caribbean, anti-drug, anti-narco networks, and the ongoing Venezuela pressure campaign. What we're also hearing about in the back channels is essentially Maduro telling the Trump administration that, listen, you can have all our oil and gas, just let me stay in power. But it seems that they're not interested, the Americans, and specifically Rubio is not interested in this particular outcome. Within this context, there are a couple of alliances that Maduro has in the region that have fallen. You have in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph Gonzalez, Comrade Gonzalez, just lost, and he lost bigly. And he was a lackey of the Maduro regime, essentially, right? And him falling is not an accident. He usually rigs those elections quite effectively and has done so in the last 2 electoral cycles. The fact that he wasn't able to do it now, it tells you that there is a lot of eyes on the elections there and outside interference on Gonzalez specifically. It's a chip down, right? And Americans were definitely a part of this electoral outcome. There's no doubt about that. But What I thought was really interesting and quite concerning, and it's been concerning me more and more, is Kamla Persad-Bissessar, Prime Minister's sort of inability to communicate what is going on in a way that is effective. I do think that she doesn't have much choice. And I touched on this in the previous video, where there's almost this suggestion that she can say, no, the Americans can't come, you know. She doesn't have that choice. And the criticism by the opposition in Trinidad People's National Movement is unfair in that regard, especially with Keith Rowley being the one who actually signed the SOFA agreement. The only choice she has is the ability to communicate and the discourse. Her discourse is her weapon. So I'm a little disappointed in the way that she's chosen to communicate, because it's really contradictory. It's really important that she gets her comms straight. The day after the official meeting in Port of Spain, Dan Caine then goes across and visits Marines. And they're like, if you go on Twitter or on X, you would see, you know, these are serious Marines that are stationed in Trinidad and Tobago that is not necessarily in the media. And we don't know how much is there officially, but I guess there's a substantial amount of US military personnel there. And he was visiting them. There are some pictures, right? Official pictures that haven't been released. But what is more is that the deployment has extended to Tobago, right? And this is where the most recent controversy, specifically with regard to Kamla's communication, is a problem. So there's a landing of a serious military aircraft in Tobago. Kamla says initially the aircraft was helping with something at the airport, right? And then she confirms US Marines doing training locally. And she said it was not a military force and there was no US campaign against Venezuela. She presented the landing as a routine support, not military deployment. And then there's a complete reversal. She said there are no US troops or assets in Trinidad and Tobago. They denied any permanent or temporary US military presence, brushed aside radar equipment sightings as misunderstanding or rumor, accused critics of fear-mongering, right? So it's just like, she's just all over the place. That's not the reality, and it's a distraction. She really needs to get she really needs to get her communications down, right? The US C-17 in Tobago on the 26th of November suggests a coordinated or at least operational overlap between those two events. They obviously fit into a wider US pattern. Increased Caribbean militarization and maritime pressure on Venezuela. There's a serious intelligence buildup. And the question is, what will happen? We don't know. There are a couple of options on the table, but Trinidad and Tobago needs to prepare for each outcome.